Thank you very much, Mr. Taner Akcam, to be with us with Radio Arménie. I'm very pleased to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So I'm Brigitte Leloire Kérackian. I'm a journalist for Radio Arménie. We have the opportunity in France to meet you in December 16th at the Hôtel de Région in Lyon at 6 p.m. And one of the most important meetings is also organized at the French Parliament on December 18th at 5:30 in Paris with Alexandre Delval. So you're a sociologist, a history teacher, you're a professor at the Shoah and Genocide Center at the University of Minnesota. Many of your books are translated in English, French, and Spanish. You made deep researches on the involvement and responsibility of the Ottoman government in the Armenian genocide. And you are the only Turk who became a well-known scholar in the Armenian genocide studies. A shameful act, un acte honteux in French, the Young Turks against humanity, the Armenian genocide and ethnic cleansing in the Ottoman Empire. Orders to Kill, Armenian 1915. I'm reminding some of your books. Your contribution to the academic knowledge on the Ottoman government responsibilities in the planning of the genocide is very valuable. It's uncommon to meet someone born in Turkey and who is a Turk, so much strongly involved in witnessing and testifying about the reality of the genocide. My first question is about your personal background and how you came to do deep researches in the involvement and responsibility of the government, the Ottoman government in the Armenian genocide.
Thank you so much again. Thank you for having me. I would like to make some corrections regarding my own biography. I'm now Director of Armenian Genocide Research Program at the University of California, UCLA. So it is more than 1 year. There is an institute recently established, Promise Armenian Institute, and I'm the director of the Genocide Research Program of that institute. This is important for our listeners. I'm living in California. This is where I am now. And secondly, I was the only Turk, maybe, academic who acknowledged the Armenian genocide, 1991. But today, there are several young and promising scholars, genocide scholars, or academics from other disciplines who acknowledge Armenian genocide openly. And there have been in the past several conferences in Turkey. So I don't want to be singled out as the only Turk. It was maybe true for 1990, but not anymore. So I'm very happy with this development. It's a small development, maybe, considering the Turkish government's denial policy. So regarding my own personal background, I came to Germany in 1978. And after several years, I completed my PhD in 1996 in Germany. And my PhD topic was on the military tribunal in Istanbul between 1919 and 1921. And actually, my first encounter with Armenian genocide was 1988. I started working in a research institute in Hamburg as a researcher, and my first research topic was the history of torture in Ottoman Empire and in modern Turkey. I wrote a book on that topic. This is the general frame, is the history of violence in Ottoman Empire. And during my readings, during my research, I encountered first time in my life that there were massacres during Abdülhamid period. I never heard of them before. I didn't know that there was a genocide against Armenian when I started working in that institute. And as a young, progressive individual, I thought this is a very interesting topic. I mean, I never heard about massacre against Armenians and Armenian genocide. I never used the term as any common Turkish intellectual. We had a certain attitude towards our history. I can summarize it generally like that. Yeah, we know something bad happened in the way back in history. We don't know. Maybe Armenians killed Turks, Turks killed Armenians. But it is better not to deal with these past. It is 100 years ago. Let's deal with our current problems. We have more important social problems in Turkey, income equality, economic poverty. I was a progressive guy. And we have the current issue and so on. So then to learn about Armenian genocide, I would say, was a surprise for me. So then I started working on that topic.
That's what I wanted to hear about you, your progressive personality and your ideas. And you were already trying to see what could move in the Turkish society. And history, studying history for you, was it an important basement to see what was going on in the Turkish society?
Yes and no. You know, I was one of the last participants of 68 youth movement in Turkey. We were all, as you may recall, or our listener may remember, 1968 was a huge moment in Europe. There was a huge students' movement in different cities, in different countries, mainly triggered by the Vietnam War and by the American invasion in Vietnam. And like in France, like in Germany, like in Italy, in Turkey also, there was a students' movement against American invasion in Vietnam, generally against colonialism. And I became a part of that movement and asking, of course, peace and democracy for Turkey. My father was a trade unionist. He was the second president of Teachers Trade Union in Turkey. So the family was almost a politicized family. I was very much engaged in Turkish students' movement, and I became the editor-in-chief of a students' movement. We considered ourselves at that time socialist. I believed in those years in socialism. I mean, not anymore. So it's over 40 years now. Of course, people change their opinions. I consider myself today as an individual thinker, mainly believes in human rights, basically, not in macro ideologies. But I was a socialist. So then the history was a part of this being a socialist. But when I came to Germany, I became a historian. So the understanding that the history is very important for the democratization of a country was a new idea that I learned in Germany. It was not my previous thought in Turkey.
Thank you very much. My second question is about the accessing to the Turkish archives of that time, because in A Shameful Act and Orders to Kill, in those books, you're showing really very precisely what was the reality of the orders and intention to kill in 1915, killing the Armenians. So how did you manage to reach those archives? I mean, Turkish archives. Could you read the original documents, the orders from the ministers to the army officers, to the to the administration and the trial of the young Turks, were they available? Did you have a specific accreditation as a professor to access to those documents? Is there a website where these documents can be seen? Or, for example, a university website to see those documents?
Oh my God, this is a very long question. And I try to answer as short as possible. We have to make a distinction between different documents. We have a set of documents, let's call them Ottoman documents from Ottoman archive. And the second set of documents, let's call them Krikor-Gergerian's archive and Krikor-Gergerian's Ottoman documents. So two set of documents. So let me talk about first the Ottoman archive in Turkey. To your surprise, or to the surprise of listeners, Ottoman archives, one of the best state archives in the world. It is accessible to everybody, digitized, especially the period related to Armenian genocide, and you can get access into that archive even in France through internet. You can buy each and single documents. So one thing is also very important to understand. The European archives, I worked in German archive, I worked in British archives, I know how archives is structured. Normally, you order the files, then you received files which has 700 pages, for example. Mm-hmm. You have to go through these 700 pages, whether digitized or not, you have to go through them. There is no specific indexing for these files that you order. This is the German or British archive. We mostly work with the Foreign Office archive. In Turkish archive or the Ottoman archive, the system is different. They catalog each and every document separately. So in catalogs, when you read actually the summary of one single document. So this makes the researcher to research more precisely. They can find the documents with keywords that they want to learn about it. So this is the better part of the Ottoman archive compared to Great Britain and France or Germany. The problem with Ottoman archive is, though, they don't present you the entire documentation. Let me put it in a different way. Every state, whether it's a democratic state or a dictatorial regime, they don't provide 100% of their state's materials. They keep some of them secret. So let's say in Germany, they might provide only 90%. British, maybe 92%. In Turkey, you have 50%, maybe 40%. So in Ottoman archives today, you cannot find the smoking guns. You cannot find the killing orders. If you search for Armenian genocide, you don't find direct evidence, what we call it. But you can find a lot of documents, what we call also circumstantial evidence. And this is my book, Young Turks' Crime Against Humanity. I published 2012, where I can prove genocidal intent of Ottoman authorities based on Ottoman archival materials in Turkey today and accessible to everyone. So this is one block, and I don't have any privilege. Every genocide, every scholar has the access into this documentation. This is number one. The second part that you are talking about, the killing orders and the similar or the trial documents from Istanbul, the Union and Progress Party trials, they were tried by the successive Ottoman governments, these materials are not accessible. They are not available in any Turkish archive. Mm-hmm. The story is complicated, but the short story is Patrick Zevan in 1990s, between 1990s, 1922, when the court-martial was open and trying the Turkish criminals, Patrick Zevan had the access to trial documents because according to Ottoman law, they had the right to represent the Armenians in the court. And they received the copies, sometimes originals of the documents. At that time, original means handwritten copies of the original documents with a seal on it, saying that it compromised the original document. And Patrick Zevan took all these documents outside of Ottoman Empire, 1922. First, they sent the materials to Marseille, then first to Manchester, from Manchester to Marseille, and from Marseille, the documents ended up in Jerusalem, in Jerusalem Patriarchate. Today, the military archive or the documents related to military tribunals in Istanbul, they are in Jerusalem, and it's not open, it's closed to researchers. The Patriarchate don't allow people to go and to research there. Okay. But Father Krikor Gergerian went to that archive and they filmed all these military tribunals documents. And I was able to get a copy of the Krikor Gergerian materials, namely the material related to the court-martial in Istanbul, and I put them on an archive, digital archive, and it is accessible. It is called Krikor Gergerian Online Archive, and you can go there and see all these original documentation.
Okay, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, this is the story.
Very interesting. Thank you very much to share this with us. So you work on the proof of the planning of the genocide and the responsibilities of the Turkish government and their long, steady denial of the genocide for more than 100 years. It's a statement. When they knew that you were working on those archives and documents and preparing your essays or your books, the Turkish government, did they threaten you?
There were serious problems at the beginning until the assassination of Hrant Dink. From 1990s all the way until 2007. It was a challenging work, a challenging issue for scholars to work on Armenian genocide. There was hate campaign against us. They called us traitors. There were lawsuits against us and death threats, of course, but not officially from government. Mm-hmm. Government cannot do this officially. Of course, there were some semi-secret groups or organizations or extra nationalist circles who organized these campaigns. Mm-hmm. And one result of these campaigns was the assassination of Hrant Dink.
Mm-hmm. So there was a pressure, a big pressure.
Of course, psychological and physical pressure, because it is not easy to stand up against these kind of state persecutions against individuals. But with the assassination of Hrant Dink, and there were also several investigations against these semi-secret organizations in Turkey, which is called, I don't know whether you have ever heard about it, Ergenekon. This was a semi-secret state organization, and they were in conflict with AKP government, with Tayyip Erdogan.
Yeah, the deep state. They call it also the deep state.
You can call it deep state. And more than 200 generals, police officers, high-ranking police officers were arrested. And after 2007, after Hrant's assassination, there was an uproar in Turkish society against this assassination. And the climate overall has changed. And this kind of persecutions against the individual like myself or like others who publicly spoke about Armenian genocide, it ceased, it curtailed, it didn't continue. And it was one of the business as usual kind of thing to talk on Armenian genocide in Turkey. And today, I would argue working on genocide is not a big problem in Turkey. It is part of general democracy problem. So you cannot single out today the suppression that you experienced. You cannot separate these from other problems of Turkey. Let me give you an example. We have an excellent foundation in Istanbul, Hrant Dink Foundation. Hrant Dink Foundation organizes every year really very important, significant conferences. Just recently, they organized a wonderful conference on the minority questions in Turkey, and they dealt with Armenian genocide too. So there are what we call it in English niches. There are certain islands where you can express your freedom of speech, your academic activity. But today, there is a dictatorial regime in Turkey, not only related to Armenian genocide, but related to other topics, Kurdish question, or other human rights issues, is very difficult to articulate. Not in universities, you may able to organize something, but not in public sphere. Let me give you a very clear example. You went to a public commemoration of Armenian genocide 2015, 100th anniversary and of Armenian genocide, because after 2007, it was a common practice in Turkey to commemorate the Armenian genocide. It started only in Istanbul, and after 2015 and so on, 2000, it became really general. There were commemorations more than 15 cities in Turkey. Now today, you cannot publicly commemorate the Armenian genocide. Government bans these kind of commemorations.
It's because Erdogan has this nationalist ideas which are spreading all over the country. And the society is affected by this nationalism and all those speeches. So any protesting movement is suppressed. So would you say that
yes,
now the Turkish society is satisfied by this nationalist system?
It's very difficult to say. I mean, this is like the same development in France or in Germany or in other European countries. This is a rise of right-wing extremism in all European societies. This is what we're experiencing in Turkey, especially after 2016. There was a failed coup d'etat attempt in Turkey. We still don't know who was the real power behind this coup d'etat attempt. There are certain claims that it was staged by Erdogan himself, and or the others argue that it was a coup d'etat attempt organized by a religious sect, which is called Gülenist, a religious person who resides in United States. At least we know that there was an attempt and coup d'etat 2016 to topple Tayyip Erdogan. And with this coup d'etat, Tayyip Erdogan established a dictatorial regime. And the most important part of this dictatorial regime, compared to previous military regime in Turkey. As you know, we had a military coup d'etat 1970, military coup d'etat 1980, military coup d'etat 1997. And in all these dictatorial regimes that lasted 3-4 years, at least there were a rule of law. You knew what is the law and what they claim, what is the claim against you, what is the charge against you. You know what the problem today is? There is a whim of dictators. There is no rule of law in Turkey.
But I would like to go back in history.
I'm sorry?
I would like to go back in history, even the Kemal Atatürk and the Kemalist government, which ruled Turkey since 1922. They kept, well, denying the genocide, but they also tried to kill other ethnic groups, and violence was a constant activity from those governments. And those Turkish people at the government, they were also fascinated by Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany. And so their fascist system and ideology was also fascinating for those Turkish government, but also probably the intellectuals, not only the political parties.
I mean, we can easily say it is the closing the circle in Turkey. We established 1923 a one-party dictatorial regime, which lasted until 1945. With 1950, Turkey opened to kind of a semi-democratic system with some interruptions, of course, military regime. And I would say with the coup d'etat 2016, we closed the circle. We are back again, 1920s, one-party dictatorial regime. I mean, today we don't have one-party dictatorial regime. We have one man's dictatorial regime. In Mustafa Kemal's period, there was a Republican Party, which is the opposition party today. But I would argue that today there is no AKP, actually. It is the Tayyip Erdogan himself, his personal cult, and he has a public support. We have to admit that also. He has a certain support from society. This is his advantages compared to Mustafa Kemal. And this is one of the central reasons why he kept his regime in Turkey. And today, at least according to opinion polls, Tayyip Erdogan's support is more than 40% in Turkish society.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, I would like to go back in history, because you also studied the Ottoman Empire's history. In that system, there were the Muslims, Turks, who were in the army and in the administration, and all the other ethnic groups, Jews, Greeks, Armenians, Christians, they had to pay taxes, and they had a certain status, the status of dhimmi, which was a lower status. So in that society, there was kind of, not really, but kind of balance between the ethnic groups. When did this imperial system change so that Armenians were considered as inside traitors and enemies?
I mean, the entire process started with the beginning of French Revolution. French Revolution, as you know, based on the idea of equality and the citizenship. And the system that you just described, what we call it millet system, this is the Ottoman system that didn't recognize the equality. There was no citizenship rule. As you rightly put, the Christians and the Jews, they were second-class citizens. Inequality was the basic structure. What we call it Muslims were the milleti hakime, dominant nation. This was the Muslims. And the non-Muslim was the second strata of the society, and they were really mistreated generally. And with the 1804 Serbian Revolution or Serbian uprising, depends how you define it, the demand of Christians started. Based on French Revolution and influenced by French Revolution, first the Serbs, then the Bulgarians, then the Greeks, then the Romanians, at that time it was called Wallachs and so on. They started asking equality. And Armenians' demand for equality in Ottoman Empire started in the second half of 19th century. The Armenians took the Greeks as an example. Armenians took the Bulgarians as an example. And then they started their social revolutionary organizations, 1870s, 1880s.
Yeah, but those Armenian groups never asked for independence or a total change of the system. Those groups only asked for equal rights.
Exactly.
And the citizenship.
This is what I said. And maybe I have to add the Serbs, the Greeks, the Bulgarians, they never asked independence at the beginning. They were also
but the Armenians too, they didn't
exactly. They were asking,
why were the Armenians considered as traitors?
Not only Armenians, the Greeks, the Bulgarians, the Serbs, they were also called traitors because Ottoman government considered the social reforms, the demands for equality as a threat to their national security. It's a very complex process. It didn't emerge one night. Look how the system worked. I explained this extensively in my several works. First, Christian groups asked for social reforms. In Armenian case, Armenian had two major demands, okay? One is political demands. This is the political equality. This was what they were asking. And second important demand that Armenians were asking, social reforms, mainly land reforms. They wanted their confiscated territories back. Their land was confiscated, for example, and a huge amount of their territories got lost after the Russian Ottoman Wars, 1876, 1877. And this reform movement that established the socialist organization, the IRF, Armenian Revolutionary Federation, or Hınçak-Stüyün, the other socialist organization, they were asking two major issues. Number one, they wanted land reform, and number two, equality, political equality. And Ottoman government considered these demands for democracy, for equality, as a threat to their security. Why? Because they created the circumstances, the Ottoman government created circumstances in Serbians, in Greek, in Bulgarian cases, that these demands, the demands for equality and demands for social reform, ended with the independence of their country, of the Bulgarians, Greece, and Serbia became independent states. And the Ottomans thought in their mentality, if a group starts asking equality and social reform, it will end with an independence of that country. So we should prevent this from the beginning. You know why Armenian genocide happened? Without even Armenians demanding an independent state, Ottomans thought this process will end up with an independent Armenia, and we should prevent this development. And you know why Turkish government today suppressed the Kurds? Kurds was not asking an independent Kurdistan. They were asking equality and social reforms. And today, Turkish government considers the Kurdish demands for equality as a security threat. We have a same mentality, same model working today.
Mm-hmm. But when orders about moving, deporting, killing Armenians arrived in the provinces in 1915, there were no protests from the army officers. And don't you think that at that time in the society, the non-Muslims were already dehumanized, like during the Holocaust against the Jews? This Ottoman Empire had already this racist vision of the world, and the execution of the killings were almost perfect. So wasn't it because the Turkish people already had this racist vision, this elimination vision? They wanted to exclude Armenians from their neighborhood?
I think the issue is more complicated that you described. Let me give you an example. In 1915, when the deportation orders came to the regions, Armenians were summoned in groups and sent to Syria. And normally the policy of Ottoman government was to deport all the Armenian convoys all the way to Syria and to kill certain amount of Armenians on their way, mainly the man population. They killed the man population and sent the women and children to the Syrian desert. We all know this is the overall pattern, overall the policy. But on the way of implementing these plans, for example, Muslims started hiding Armenians in their houses. So it is not so that 100% or 80% of Turks or Muslims supporting Ottoman government's eliminatory policies. Why we know that? Because July 1915, Third Army, Ottoman Third Army, sent a circular. This is what you can find in Grigor-Gergerian archive. I published the original of that order. And this is the documents from the Istanbul military tribunals. Third Army sent a circular to all provinces and the governors and the army commanders saying that any Muslim who will save an Armenian will be hanged in front of his house and his house will be burned down. So this is an army order because they couldn't control the process. Muslims, neighbors of Armenians, started hiding Armenians in their houses. So then this order was released because they could only implement this exterminatory policy through that way. So there were Kurdish tribes, saved Armenian lives, but there were Kurdish tribes independently attacked convoys and killed Armenians. So what I'm trying to tell you is, don't make an image that every Muslim or every Turk were perpetrators. It was, of course, at the end, you can make the conclusion, you can draw the conclusion, if the majority of Turks had supported the Armenians or opposed the government policies, the genocide could not happen. It is true, there was a general atmosphere in society against Armenians. This is what we call it in Europe, for example, anti-Semitism. Genocides cannot happen without the atmosphere that created it. But I will talk extremely against to call every individual as racist or as killer. This is, I think, a wrong way of explaining the entire process. There were individuals who couldn't, he were, you know, they were not racist, but they were what we call bystander. They were scared to intervene. They just watched the process. There were those Muslims who participated in the killing process. They confiscated Armenian properties. They plundered Armenian properties. But there were other genuine Turks also. So don't brush with one color. Everything was not black and white. So this is what I want to say.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, most Armenians in those millets disappeared, and the ones who survived, they had to hide. And so some Armenian survivors tried to go back to their properties, and they were expelled by the Turkish villages. So that's also a reality.
It is true. It is a true. I mean, it's a true thing. You know, I'm in our field in genocide research. There is an explanation. We call it intentionalist, or we call it essentialist approach. Let me formulate this essentialist approach. Turks are barbarians and they kill the Armenians. Yeah, this is the theory. This is wrong. This is a total, you cannot declare every individual intentionalist killers.
No, but you have this atmosphere in the society.
I have to emphasize again, genocide is not a simple process of intention of individuals because they were killers. You know, this is a huge topic in genocide research. Mm-hmm. In Germany, in Holocaust research, there are several theories about it. Killing of Armenians or making a decision for exterminating Armenians was a result of a process. You cannot explain with the essentialist argument. I know that. I mean, I read in certain books. I'm familiar with all these genocide theories. There is one explanation. Oh, Turks started killing the Christian beginning of 12th century because Turks are murderers and they love to kill people. So when they find the opportune moment, they kill. So this is Turkish attitude. This is, I'm sorry, this is not a theory. This is a wrong approach to historical process. It is true what you said. When the Armenians survived, 200,000 around Armenians survived the genocidal process, and there were a lot of Armenians converted Islam and then stayed in their villages. And when they returned back, it is true, Turkish nationalists attacked these villages and killed the Armenians. They searched for the remaining Armenians. And there was a policy of Turkish government. I'm emphasizing this. It is not the character of individual. It is the policy of government. You know, you can change the policy of government. And this is for what we are fighting. And it will change. You know, in Germany, it is the same. In France, you have a right extremist movement now in race. You cannot say every French individual is a racist. No, it doesn't work like that. It is the politique. And indeed, Turkish nationalism, beginning of 1920s, had a very clear policy. No Christian in country. This was Turkish nationalist policy. Yeah. And this policy continued until they expelled an important number of Christians out of Turkey. But then there remained a huge number of Armenians in Istanbul, and of course, a lot of converted Armenians in several cities. They were not successful to remove entire Armenians. Yes, it is a government policy, and government policy can be changed. And this is what
this is one of my questions. What could be implemented in Turkey to change this vision of the neighbor Armenians, the Republic of Armenia, to be seen as such a threat again? What can be seen to end this? How can I say this 100 years conflict?
This is very difficult.
Well, Hrant Dink tried to build bridges.
Yeah,
a few groups of people in the early 12,000 were able to speak, and and some articles of Harlem Dink were quite popular. So that was almost 20 years ago. Now it's totally changed. So what could be possible to modify this status?
It's very difficult, as I said, and I have to emphasize again, we do not need to single out Armenians. Turkey has a very general problem of democratization, and Turkey have a very serious Kurdish problem, and Turkey has a very serious human rights issues. So Armenian question generally today, and Turkey-Armenian relations directly related with Turkey's democracy. And democratization is a long process, and I'm very pessimist in that regard. Not only regarding Turkey, I'm very pessimist what is going on in France. I'm very pessimist what is going on in Germany. The Nazi party is around, right extremist party in Germany is now around 30%. And I'm very pessimist what's going on in the world. Everybody now supporting Israel's bombing of Palestinian children and kids. What I want to say is there is a right-wing extremist government in Turkey, and this government has an important public support, and it is a long process to democratize this country. I cannot give you any date. I cannot give you any bright future. But, as a human being, you don't have anything else but to fight for democracy and for human rights. And this is the major problem in Turkey. And I assume that one day democratic conditions will come back again, and Turkey and Armenian relation will normalize. But I'm very pessimist in that regard also, not because of Turkey and Armenia, because of Azerbaijan. Turkey is today hostage of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has an important investment in Turkey. They control an important part of Turkish economy. They have oil, they have natural gas, and they have important control even on Turkish media. And this problem, the normalization of Turkish-Armenian relation, cannot be happen in a very short period of time. And I can only repeat, I'm one of those guys. We have to continue to fight with Hrant Dink's spirit. This is the only way. We can be pessimist and sit at home. This is what I'm not suggesting. But as I repeat again, it's very dark days.
Okay.
And I'm not hopeful.
Let's talk about your latest book, 100 Years of Apartheid. I don't know the title in Turkish. Can you tell us about this new book? Because you're also presenting it during all your conferences in France in December.
Well, it's a long topic. We are almost completed 1 hour. I'm a genocide scholar, and I worked and published on Armenian genocide mostly, the period during First World years, and how the developments unfolded in Armenian genocide. So basically, my main topic of interest had been 1878 all the way 1920, including the tribunals in Istanbul. Now, with my new book, I entered a new era. This is the early Republic period. Early Republic period.
Okay.
Turkish Republic, early Republic. So I was a late Ottoman Empire historian, and I never worked on early Turkish Republic period. So this book is the first start for the early Republic period. And this is about 1920s and 1930s.
In the title, you use the word apartheid, which is a very strong word, and the meaning of it is very deep.
My central argument in that book, I have 4 major arguments, and I would repeat these arguments and maybe come to a conclusion in our conversation. I have 4 central arguments. Number 1, Turkey is an apartheid regime. And this apartheid regime was established knowingly and consciously by the founders. So my first argument, Mustafa Kemal and his friends established an apartheid regime. What is this? On top of the society, there is one group controls the entire system. These are Muslim Turks. And there is a middle category, and this is the non-Turkish Muslims, Kurds, Circassians, and there is a religious group in Turkey, maybe you have heard, Alevites. This is the middle group. And on the bottom is the Christians and Jews. And I argue that this is a caste system, like the Indian caste system. I'm not talking here about ideology, about Armenian hatred or Christian hatred or nationalism. I'm talking about laws and regulations. This is maybe striking. I'm talking that there are laws and regulations in Turkey that created unequal citizens. Jews and Christians are the bottom of the society, and they are not allowed to participate in political, social, cultural, economic life of the country as equals as the Muslims. And in my book, in this latest book, I introduce these laws and regulations, how these groups, like the Nazis, how the Nazis cataloged and registered Jews based on their ethnic or religious origin. And I show the documents, I will show in France the documents that exactly the same way. And today we have this caste system in society. For example, in their registration books, in Turkey today, Armenians were given the number 2, the Greeks were given number 1, and the Jews were given number 3. So let's assume an Armenian boy, 4th or 5th generation, even have forgotten his Armenians or her Armenians, Turkish, and totally assimilated in Turkish society, speaks only Turkish. Turkish government knows because of the registration that he's an Armenian, and he cannot be employed in state. So my first argument in the book is very simple and asking a very simple question. Now, Turkish Republic has 100 years, okay? It's a 100 year of a republic. Is there any high-ranking army officers in Turkish army, who is Christian, general or lieutenant? No. Another question, is there any Christian in high office of security forces, police, or secret service? No. Is there any Christians in high legal system, judges, or members of constitutional court? No. Why not? Why over 100 years, no one single Christian general, no one single Christian judge, no one single Christian security force member? Is it a coincidence? Or were these Christian groups dumb? They could not go to school? No, this is a system. This is my argument. And in book, I show that there are investigations, for example, before accepting the students in military schools. They interrogate each and every applicant, and if they find out that the applicant has an Armenian background or any Christian or Jewish background, regardless how the individual is today, let's say it's assimilated Turk, has a Turkish name, applies to military school, wants to be a military officer in Turkish army, no, they cannot be accepted in military schools. So my first argument is there is an apartheid regime. And my second argument is very simple again. So why we didn't know that until now? I mean, nobody spoke about apartheid. This is an obvious apartheid. Read all the international legal text regarding apartheid in international law. You will see it's exactly the same what in Turkey happens. And why we didn't know that? Why nobody talk about it? Why we never get the conscience of it? The answer is, again, I mean, I have an answer to that. And it is because we considered 1918, 1923 period, the period of what Turks called War of Liberation. We consider this period not a period of foundation of apartheid regime. In Turkish understanding, in Armenian understanding also, in every understanding, if you ask anybody about 1918, 1923 period, you will discuss this period as a Turkish war against Great Britain, France, and the other forces for independence of Turkey.
A survival war, a kind of survival.
Exactly. This is the overall theory, and my argument is it is wrong. It was at the same time the period of establishment of apartheid regime, and I showed this along the certain documents, the decisions taken in Turkish parliament, for example. You know, for this, I mean, I will explain this in at length in my presentations. There is a project in United States, and I advise everybody, I suggest to look into that project. It is called New York Times 1619 project. And New York Times 1619 project started 2019. And the question they asked was very simple. They asked, is there racism in United States? They answered, yes. Everybody answers, yes, there is a racism in country. And the second question they asked, so what is the origin of this racism? Why we have racism in United States today? Their answer was very simple. United States founded as a state acknowledged the slavery.
Acknowledge, sorry?
Slavery.
Slavery, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
In
and
America,
the killing of the native Indians.
Native Indians were exterminated.
Yeah.
So Americans theoretically could have established a democratic state because they killed natives, and the rest of them, they could have established a democratic state. But they put, at least in 3 articles, in American Constitution, acknowledged the slavery as an institution. So the New York Times 1619 project argued in the following way. Because we discuss the American history only as an independent war of liberation against British occupation, we ignored the foundation process. America was founded on racism, actually, on racial discrimination. So we should stop talking on that period only a war of liberation. Of course, there was a war of liberation. Americans fought against Great Britain, but at the same time, America was established on the slave ownership. They allowed slave trade more than 30, 40 years. So yeah. This is my argument for Turkey, because we, the progressive, the leftists, everybody discussed Turkish history as Turkish War of Independence. And we ignored the foundation of this apartheid regime. This is my second argument in the book. And my third argument, that we have to write the history of 1918, 1938. This is the founding period of Turkish Republic. So as you see, I'm not dealing with Armenian genocide anymore. I mean, my main focus of research is what we call it post-genocidal period, 1920s, 30s. And my third argument is, in Turkish history writing, in Turkish historiography, we hardly incorporated Armenian genocide, Greek genocide, and Assyrian genocide in the modern history of Turkey. So we have to incorporate this in 1920s, in 1930s. This is what I try to develop in this book. This is my third argument. And fourth argument is very simple again. It is analogy to United States. We cannot create a democratic society if we only boost, if we only proud with our founding fathers. Let's say in American example, Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and so on and so forth. In Turkish case, Mustafa Kemal and his friends. My argument is, if we want to develop a democratic society, we should develop a distance between ourselves and our founding fathers. We need new founders. America needs new founder. Martin Luther King is an example. And in Turkey, also, if we want to create a democratic society, we need new founders. And Hrant Dink is, for me, the founder of this new Turkish Republic. This is an utopia kind of thing, but it shows Turks, if they really believe in democracy, they cannot achieve democracy in Turkey only by really holding Kemal Atatürk as their founding fathers. It is impossible, because those founders established an apartheid regime. So we need new founders who fought for equality in this society. And Hrant Dink was one of these individuals. He's, for me, the founder of the new republic. This is the argument in the book. And I have other individual names, and suggested that we should call them also founder of Turkey, where the equality of all citizens were established.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taner Akcam. It's very enlightening to listen to you. I'm sure that our audience will be very much interested in in what we talked about today. Thank you so much. And I, of course, encourage our audience to read your books, buy your books, and attend your conferences, and the one in December 18th in Paris at the French Parliament.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.